After coming back to life, I, Lisa, no longer cared where Ethan went or what he did. I no longer got angry when he took all the allowance the Quinn family gave us and handed it to the orphaned mother and child of his fallen comrade. I didn't cry or threaten him with death just because he postponed registering our marriage. I once thought that was enough for me to let go. But then he told me to give up my official employment quota at Brookdale Textile Mill and give it to Sophie Winters. He spoke in such a righteous tone, saying Sophie was raising a child on her own, and that as an officer's wife, how could I be so narrow-minded? I simply smiled gently and said, "All right," then quietly glanced at the calendar on the wall. In just a few days, I would be leaving for the South to attend college, and that textile mill, 2 years from now, would undergo massive layoffs. It was only a box of fruit preserves our team received, he continued. I gave it to Sophie and her kid. Do you really need to be this angry? She just lost her husband and still has to raise a small child. Why can't you be more understanding? When Andrew was deployed, what he worried about the most was his wife and kid. If I don't help them now, how could I ever face him again? Looking at Ethan holding that familiar box of preserves, my hands trembled uncontrollably. The scene before me told me clearly. This was the second chance heaven had given me. Thinking about the tragic death of my previous life, my heart throbbed painfully. In everyone's eyes, I was never worthy of Ethan Carter. Whether in background or appearance, I was far beneath him. He was the commander of a military district who had returned with great merit, while I was just an orphaned girl from the mountains with no power or status. If not for my grandfather and the Carter family sharing a life-saving bond, and my grandfather's dying wish that I be engaged to Ethan, we would never have had any connection at all. But I had lived under the Carter family's roof for 3 years now, and this was the year Ethan intended to fulfill our engagement. However, not long ago, Sophie Winters' husband, Andrew, died in the line of duty. Before he died, Ethan had promised to take care of Sophie and her child for the rest of his life. That was his vow. And in my previous life, just to stay by his side, I gave up the chance to be sent to college. I resigned myself to taking care of him for 45 years, spending my entire life trapped inside the small Carter house, serving my in-laws and raising children. Yet when I was lying on my deathbed, I saw Ethan holding Sophie's hand as they prepared to celebrate their golden anniversary. My son, the child I single-handedly raised, hid from me that he had married her daughter. I even wrote a screenplay for their perfect family of 4, just to celebrate their reunion, a reunion that did not include me. In that moment, the contempt in my in-laws' eyes, Ethan's coldness, and my son's disdain filled me with bitter unwillingness. Why? Why did the in-laws I served day and night while they were bedridden repay me with a husband who sought romance elsewhere? Why did the son I bore at the risk of my life and raised to adulthood force me to sign divorce papers, telling me I wasn't worthy of his father? Why did I have to bury my entire life for them? With the last of my strength, I dragged myself to the gate of the university. I wondered if everything would have been different had I never married Ethan Carter. But before I could think further, I took my final breath. When I opened my eyes again, heaven had given me another chance. This time, I returned to the moment right before I was sent to attend college on a public assignment. Everything was still in time. I looked at Ethan standing before me, speaking in a gentle and persuasive tone, his eyes slightly reddened. I said softly, "I know. You can take the preserves to them." Ethan clearly paused for a moment, his hand tightening as he covered his mouth and cleared his throat twice. "Don't worry," Ethan said. "Next time I won't take it again." I knew that line all too well. It was exactly the same as when, in my previous life, he forced me to give up my room. I didn't answer him, nor did I bother telling him that the preserves were something the doctor told me to eat because of my bronchitis. I simply turned around and walked away. The calendar on the wall earlier showed that today was the last day to register, and the admission notice still hadn't arrived yet. Every mistake had returned to its starting point, and I had the chance to fix everything. This time, I absolutely wouldn't spend my whole life being a fool again. I ran straight to the office of the factory director. "Sir, I've thought it through. I want to go to college." He froze for a moment, then asked cautiously, Are you sure? If you leave, you won't be back for 5 years, and you'll be going all the way down south. Still, your skills at the mill are the best we have. It'd be a shame if you didn't go. But you and Commander Ethan are about to get married, so it's understandable you might not want to leave. Everyone thought I would never leave Ethan to study in the South. But after living one whole life already, how could I stop and waste everything because of him? I'm very sure, I said. I want to study. As for Ethan, I'm sure he'd want me to become a better person too. In the end, the director agreed, telling me the admission letter and train ticket would arrive in a few days, and that I should hurry home to prepare. I had 1 week left before reporting to school. I let out a breath as I stepped out of the office, and right then, as I reached the entrance of the state-owned store, I saw Ethan pushing his bicycle alongside Sophie Winters and her daughter Lily. Sophie was wearing a soft red outfit, looking gentle and elegant. Lily clung to Ethan's arm, calling affectionately, "Daddy Ethan, look." If I didn't know better, I would have thought they were a happy family of 3. I pretended not to see them and walked straight past, but Sophie's sharp eyes still caught sight of me. She called out, "Lisa, don't misunderstand. Lily doesn't know any better. She keeps asking where her dad went, and Ethan, being kind, told her that someday he'd be her dad." Before I could respond, Ethan rushed to smooth things over. "No, Lisa isn't the type to hold grudges. Don't worry about it." I let out a bitter laugh. In my previous life, Sophie's daughter also called Ethan Dad. At first, I felt uncomfortable, and even argued with him a few times. But each time, he said that Lily's father was a martyr who died for the country, and that Sophie and her daughter were pitiful and alone. As the wife of a military officer, I should be understanding. So I swallowed it all down and endured an entire lifetime. But had anyone ever endured anything for me? Had anyone ever thought of my feelings? I smiled and said calmly, "Of course it's fine. If Lily wants to call him Dad, I fully support it." Ethan frowned slightly, clearly not expecting me to be so generous today. His eyes searched mine, but I didn't look at him. Instead, my gaze fell directly on Sophie. She had a naturally pleasant face. Even at 50 in my previous life, she was still charming and elegant. Meanwhile, I had spent years toiling in the house, worn down until my appearance looked tired and plain. No wonder she won Ethan's heart so easily. At that moment, the store clerk came out with a newly finished dress. Just one glance, and I instantly recognized the fabric. It was the material I had saved up for 2 years to make my wedding dress. And now, Ethan had taken it and given it to Sophie. His expression turned awkward as he rushed to explain, "Lisa, don't misunderstand. Sophie's clothes were too tight, and I noticed we still had some fabric at home, so I gave it to her." I replied calmly, "It's all right. It's just the fabric I planned to use to make my wedding dress that you gave to someone else." Ethan's face went completely rigid. "I'm sorry, I didn't know," Ethan said. "I promise I'll get you another piece before the wedding." Meanwhile, Sophie Winters looked aggrieved, pretending she wanted to return the dress to me. "I'm sorry, Lisa. Here, take it back. I can wear a smaller size instead." I glanced at the dress, not because it didn't fit me, but because I felt nothing but disgust. "That color suits you," I said. "You should keep it." Without caring about the stunned look on both of their faces, I turned and left. When I got home, I immediately went to my room and began packing. The house had 2 bedrooms and a living room, bought by Ethan's grandfather as a wedding home for us. 2 years ago, Ethan and I moved in together. But in truth, there was very little in this place that belonged to me. The only things tied to me were the wool sweaters and scarves I had knitted for Ethan over the years, things I never got the chance to give him. Now, there was no need to give them at all. I gathered them up and stuffed them into a single bag. Early the next morning, I brought the bag to the black market and exchanged everything for $50. Even though attending college on a public assignment meant I didn't have to worry about tuition, having a little money on hand was still necessary. After that, I bought a few essentials to take with me, then returned home. As I approached the apartment building, I saw the lights already on. Ethan had returned. I was just about to step inside when I heard Sophie's soft, caring voice from within. "Are you sure it's really okay? That fabric coupon of Lisa's that you gave me. You two are about to register your marriage, aren't you?" Ethan answered. It's fine. I already asked the unit to postpone the registration. There's still time. I'll make it up to her later. Sophie let out a sigh, sounding so pitiful. That's wonderful. I really admire the two of you. Not like me, a widow with a child. Her voice grew smaller. Ethan, once you get married, will you still care about my daughter and me? Without the slightest hesitation, Ethan replied, Of course. Don't overthink it. Honestly, if it weren't for the engagement our grandfather made, Lisa and I wouldn't have ended up together anyway. My fists tightened, nails digging into my palms until it hurt, just to suppress the bitterness rising in my chest. Even though I had already decided to let go of this man, hearing my own fiancé speak so coldly still made my heart twist in pain. I took a deep breath to steady myself, then pretended nothing had happened as I stepped inside. Ethan immediately stood up. Lisa, you're back? I brought your favorite, meatballs and brown sauce from the cafeteria today. Go wash your hands and eat. I paused in surprise. In both my lifetimes, Ethan had almost never done something like this. When I sat down at the table, I saw little Lily Winters dividing the meatballs, one for herself, one for her mother, and one placed in Ethan's bowl. There was only one person she didn't serve. Me. Ethan noticed and quickly picked up the meatball from his bowl to place it in mine. The room instantly grew strangely quiet, the only sound being Lily's cheerful chatter echoing awkwardly above the dinner table. After we finished eating, I quietly returned to my room and locked the door. Not long after, there was a knock. It was Ethan. Irritated, I opened it, only to see Sophie and Lily standing there as well. Then Ethan spoke. Lisa, Sophie's place has a leak. They've tried fixing it several times, but it's still not done. I was thinking maybe they could stay here for now. Your room over here is pretty spacious, so you could move into my room and we can let them use yours. Would that be okay? If this had been my previous life, I would have agreed without a second thought. But now, not only was I not angry, I even smiled gently. That's fine. They're the wife and daughter of your fallen comrade. It's the right thing to do. No matter what, in only 5 days, I would leave this place forever. This house belonged to him. Whoever stayed here or didn't stay here no longer mattered to me. The next morning, Ethan was busy carrying bags and packages as he helped Sophie Winters and her daughter move in. The sight annoyed me, but just then the factory director called me to pick up my admission notice and train ticket. I gladly stepped out to avoid watching any more of that scene. On my way back, I happened to run into Ethan's former superior, Mr. Turner. When he learned that I would soon be heading south for college, he asked, "What about Ethan? Weren't you two going to register for marriage soon?" I simply shook my head. I've thought it through. We're not compatible. Hearing that, he immediately tried to persuade me, saying that with my current circumstances, Ethan was the best support I could hope for. But he didn't know how deeply I regretted marrying that man in my previous life. I only nodded politely and asked him to keep this to himself, then turned back home. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Sophie wearing my apron as she busied herself cooking in the kitchen. Her daughter Lily was playing with crayons, scribbling all over my favorite tablecloth. Ethan, who was always so particular about cleanliness and order, stood there watching Lily with a gentle, indulgent smile, not the slightest bit bothered. I said nothing and didn't waste any emotion on it. I just quietly went to my own room. Not long after, there was a knock. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there holding a cloth bag full of fresh lychees. In this era, lychees cost $30 a pound, shockingly expensive. "Lisa," he said, "I've moved out to the living room. I'll sleep on the couch tonight. You go ahead and rest in the bedroom comfortably." I nodded, taking the bag of fruit, and was just about to close the door when Ethan hesitated, then spoke. "Today I met your factory director. He said once you get an official permanent position, they'll assign you housing. Lisa, look at Sophie. She hasn't been at the factory long, and she's raising a child alone. Life isn't easy for her. How about you give her your chance at the permanent position? That way the two of them will have a place to live. As the wife of a commanding officer, you should have vision, think for others, live for the collective. That's what true generosity is." In my previous life, he had said these exact same words. And because I couldn't bear to part with the man I thought I would build a family with, I quietly gave up my opportunity to attend public university, never telling anyone. But the next day, Ethan even forced me to give up the permanent position to Sophie as well. I refused, and we fought a terrible fight. In the end, with no other option, he reluctantly dropped the idea. The following year, with Ethan's financial help, Sophie passed an adult university exam, then went abroad to study, eventually becoming a renowned returning professor admired by everyone. Meanwhile, only a few years later, the textile mill underwent layoffs. Those without degrees or connections, including me, were the first to be dismissed, with no one caring or offering help. Thinking of that, I couldn't help but laugh. Without hesitation, I nodded. "All right, I agree." Ethan lit up with joy and grabbed my hand tightly. "Lisa, I knew you were the most understanding. I've made you suffer, but don't worry. Once Sophie and her daughter settle down, I'll marry you. I'll treat you really well." I only nodded casually. "It's fine." Too bad that the two of us would never have a future anymore. For the next 2 days, I avoided seeing Ethan as much as possible. Whenever he came home from work, I found an excuse to chat with the neighbors instead. It wasn't until 3 days before my departure, late at night, that when I returned from the neighbor's house, I found the place in complete chaos, as if it had been turned upside down. The luggage I had carefully packed long ago was torn open. My heart clenched as I rushed to the next room. Sure enough, little Lily was holding a pair of scissors in her hand, surrounded by shredded scraps of fabric scattered all over the floor. They were the practice pieces I had prepared meticulously for my college assessment. When she saw my eyes widen, Lily wasn't frightened at all. Instead, she cheerfully held up a hole-filled piece of fabric and proudly showed it to me. "Auntie Lisa, your fabric is so pretty. I used it to make clothes for my doll. Look." In front of me, that dirty doll was wearing what used to be the most precious piece of silk I had brought with me, now reduced to a torn, perforated mess. My head exploded. I lunged forward and yanked it out of her hand. "Who gave you permission to touch my things?" Lily was startled at first, then immediately burst into loud sobs. "You mean lady? You hit me. I'll tell Daddy Ethan to kick you out of the house." She dropped to the floor and wailed even louder. Her crying quickly attracted attention. Ethan Carter rushed in from the living room. "Lily, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" He scooped her up, face full of distress, while Sophie Winters stood beside him with reddened eyes. "Lisa, if you're unhappy that we moved in, just say it. You don't have to take it out on a child. She only took a few pieces of your fabric to make doll clothes. Did you really have to make such a big deal out of it?" Then she ran to the memorial photo of Andrew Winters, tears streaming down her face as she wailed. "Andrew, you died for this country, and now your daughter and I are being bullied like this." Seeing the two of them crying so pitifully, Ethan bent down, picked up the shredded fabric from the floor, and handed it to me. "Lisa, I know this fabric is precious to you. On behalf of Lily, I'm sorry." For a moment, I softened. I had never imagined he would side with me, but the very next sentence froze my entire body. "But no matter what happened, you shouldn't hold a grudge against a child. Lisa, apologize to Sophie and Lily. Let's just drop this." Ethan frowned sharply, his tone growing impatient. "Lisa, don't make this difficult." I let out a cold laugh, leaning against the wall. Behind him, Sophie began sobbing even louder when she saw I didn't apologize. "Lily only accidentally ruined your things. If it's such a big deal, I can compensate you. But was it worth hitting a child over?" Anger surged through me. I held up the mangled fabric. "Compensate me? How exactly do you plan to compensate for this? This is my assessment project. I stayed up for months working on it. Every stitch, every thread, I made with my own hands. Tell me, how will you compensate for that?" Ethan's expression shifted instantly. This is the project you stayed up the last few nights to finish?" I didn't answer. My whole body was shaking with fury. Sophie opened her mouth to say something, but Ethan stopped her and led her out to the living room. He closed the door, sighed, and wrapped his arms around me. "Lisa, Lily's just a kid. She didn't mean it. You're the adult. Just let it go. I know having Sophie and her daughter here makes you uncomfortable. I promise they'll move out soon, and we'll have our space back like before. So please, be the bigger person. Don't hold grudges against a child. Okay?" In my previous life, Ethan had also said the exact same thing to me. "Lisa, you shouldn't argue with a child. She's just a kid. Why take it so seriously?" But I asked myself, on what grounds was I expected to endure? Was I supposed to repeat the same mistakes, bowing my head again and again, swallowing everything in silence for the rest of my life? I looked down at the shredded fabric in my hands, ruined beyond repair. Just like the relationship between me and Ethan, already broken without any hope of mending. Every last bit of hesitation inside me vanished. I shoved Ethan away hard. His eyes widened in shock as I bent down, grabbed the filthy doll off the floor, and threw it straight out the window. This time, I would not endure anything. I returned to my room and locked the door tight. Immediately afterward, Lily's heartbreaking screams echoed from the next room. She kept wailing that the doll was her favorite one in the world. Ethan tried comforting her for a whole hour, and in the end, he had to promise he would buy her the newest doll the very next morning, before she finally stopped crying. The following morning, the three of them left the house hand in hand. As soon as the door clicked shut, I pulled out the suitcase I had prepared long ago and made up my mind to leave earlier than planned. Before going, I left an envelope on the table, my annulment letter, along with 2 short sentences. "Ethan Carter, I'm leaving. And as of today, our engagement is over. I understand your promise to Sophie and her daughter, and I know in your eyes I've always been a burden. Now it's all settled. I wish all of you happiness." After that, I took the bus to the train station and exchanged my ticket for the earliest departing train. Only when I finally sat down in my seat did all the tension inside me, built up over the past few days, slowly begin to unravel. Looking out the window at the endless greens stretching along both sides of the tracks, I felt my spirits ease with each sway of the train. In my previous life, for the sake of the Carter family, I sacrificed my youth. I was trapped inside a 4-walled house with no freedom, no future. I died without ever knowing how vast the outside world really was. Now that I had been reborn, I was completely awake. Nothing and no one could stop me from moving forward anymore. The engagement with Ethan was never something he truly wanted. That was why he was cold and indifferent. So I no longer needed to care about him either. My life would not revolve around him again. I had my own ambitions, my own career, an entire world waiting to be explored. This time, going south for college, I was the one chosen by the factory to study advanced textile techniques, sent as a representative to contribute to the nation's economic reforms. Compared to that purpose, Ethan Carter was pitifully insignificant. After more than 10 hours on the train, I finally arrived. Guided by student volunteers, I made my way to the Academic Affairs office to complete the registration process. Everything was arranged smoothly. Soon after came the opening ceremony. Sitting inside the lecture hall, my heart surged with an indescribable feeling, as if I had been reborn. In my previous life, I never had the chance to step inside a university. I died cold and alone on the street. But in this life, I would cherish every opportunity life granted me. Each day, aside from eating and sleeping, all my remaining time was devoted either to class or to working beside the machines, tirelessly studying textile technology. Whenever the professor stood on the podium and spoke about the future of the textile industry, a bittersweet ache always welled up in my chest. Because I remembered how, in my previous life, every time the subject of college came up, Ethan's mother never stopped mocking me. She would sneer, "You're jealous, aren't you? Look at someone like Sophie Winters. She got into college with her own ability and even studied abroad. Not like you, who only knows how to stay at home and do chores. Marrying into our Carter family is a blessing you earned after several lifetimes. A woman who only sweeps floors and wipes windows all day. What man wouldn't be sick of that? You're living in fortune and don't even know it. No wonder my son isn't close to you. Look at Sophie and learn from her. She talks to children so gently, patiently, telling them interesting stories. And you spend all day looking like someone at a funeral." Back then, I truly believed that if I treated them well enough, they would eventually love me back. So the more they belittled me, the harder I tried. Slowly, I lost myself entirely, all for the sake of a tiny sliver of approval. Only when I died did I realize how ridiculous and miserable that life had been. Thinking of that, I took a deep breath and ruthlessly shoved all those memories into a dark corner of my mind. I focused everything on the path ahead. I gradually adapted to the busy and fulfilling life of studying here, and my memories of the Carter family faded, pushed far back into my mind. But I didn't expect an uninvited guest to suddenly appear. The next time I saw Ethan Carter was 3 months later. That day, my classmates and I had just walked out of the cafeteria and were heading back to class when I saw him standing in front of the lecture hall, carrying luggage, looking disheveled. His face was tired and dusty. I frowned. "What are you doing here?" Ethan stared at me, unable to believe his eyes. Only when I spoke did he finally recognize that the woman standing in front of him was Lisa. Because I majored in fashion design, my classmates and I often tried on new styles, varied cuts, fresh looks. And with the warm, humid southern climate, my skin had become noticeably fairer. I no longer looked sickly, yellowish, or aged like before. So his shock was understandable. But conversely, he now looked like a completely different person. A worn-out face, unshaven, his uniform wrinkled, unpressed, even stained with a large oil blotch on the sleeve. I grew impatient. "If you have something to say it. I'm busy." Ethan finally came back to his senses, his eyes reddening. "Lisa, why did you break off our engagement? Didn't we agree? Once Sophie and her daughter were settled, we'd go register our marriage." His tone was full of anger and confusion. I met his eyes, my voice icy. "Ethan Carter, when did I ever say I would register with you? And you moved our registration date without telling me a word. The letter I left before I left, clearly stating the engagement was terminated. Wasn't that official enough?" Ethan frowned, still unable to understand. "Why, Lisa? Wasn't our engagement something we both understood? If you're still mad that Chloe accidentally cut up your fabric that day, then I apologize for her. After you graduate and return home, we can register, okay?" He reached out as if to take my hand, but instead brushed the stack of fabric I was holding, knocking it to the ground. In that instant, the scene of my fabric being shredded by Chloe in my previous life flashed through my mind. I didn't hesitate. I slapped him, hard. The sound echoed sharply. The slap left a bright red mark across Ethan's cheek. He stared at me, stunned, completely unprepared for such a reaction. He wanted to get angry, but with the students around watching, he could only swallow it down. Students walking by made him swallow his anger and let out a long, frustrated sigh instead. "Lisa, I know you're still upset because Lily ruined your work. It's understandable you're angry, so I won't hold that slap against you. But you need to understand, kids messing around at home is normal. If you had kept your materials stored away more carefully that day, none of this would have happened. So honestly, the blame isn't entirely on her. You played a part in it too." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I was furious. His daughter secretly opened my luggage, took the fabric I had prepared for my graduation assessment, and cut it into little pieces for her toys. And now he was blaming me for not putting things away properly. On top of that, Lily had clearly been pretending to cry that day. Even when he carried her into the room, she turned around and made faces at me, mocking me. But I knew that no matter what I said, Ethan Carter would never believe me. In his eyes, I was always the one at fault, and Sophie and her daughter were always the victims, the ones who deserved forgiveness and protection. I had never expected Ethan to defend me the way he defended Sophie. But I also never expected that he would turn around and side with them, forcing me to apologize. My voice grew cold, sharp as a blade. "Ethan Carter, who are you to apologize on her behalf? And another thing, the one who was wronged was me. But instead of defending me, you blame me just so I'll swallow the humiliation and apologize to them? You told me to give them my room. I had nowhere left to store my materials, so I kept them in my backpack with the zipper closed. Tell me, how else was I supposed to protect them?" "Lisa, wait," Ethan said, grabbing my arm. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just... Sophie said she saw your fabric lying on the bed, so..." I cut him off immediately. "You don't need to explain anything. Whatever existed between us ends here. And from today on, don't ever come looking for me again." I turned and walked away, but Ethan panicked and grabbed my wrist tightly. "Lisa, there must be some misunderstanding. Just listen to me, okay? I never wanted to break up with you. If the problem is Sophie and Lily, I swear I'll tell them to move out as soon as we get back. Let's just start over, all right? I let out a short, bitter laugh, enunciating every word clearly. Ethan Carter, how do you still have the face to say that? You're right, you never wanted to cancel the engagement. But while you were with me, you always treated me like a burden. Isn't that true? And I heard every word you said to Sophie that day. You said that, if it weren't for your grandfather's engagement agreement, you and I would never have ended up together. So now I'm helping you. Congratulations, you're finally free to devote yourself wholeheartedly to the person you truly want to protect. I'm giving your little family of 3 my blessing. Saying those words felt incredibly liberating. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't resentful. All I felt was a quiet, peaceful relief. Ethan stood frozen as if struck by lightning. After a long moment, he finally lifted his head, stunned. Lisa, you misunderstood. That day I just misspoke, that's all. I never thought about not marrying you, and about Sophie and Lily. You know, before he died, Andrew asked me to take care of them. It's also something the unit entrusted me with. I swear on my honor as a soldier, there is nothing between Sophie and me. In my previous life, Ethan Carter had told me the exact same words. He said nothing was going on between him and Sophie, that he only felt sympathy for her and her daughter. But after we married, in every matter large and small, Sophie was always his top priority. Even the day I went into labor and nearly died from complications, he still took Sophie and Lily to the amusement park. The child I risked my life to bring into this world was gradually shaped and influenced by them, slowly growing distant from me. Until eventually, when my son married Lily, I didn't even know about it. I only heard the news after the wedding was already over. How ridiculous. Thinking back to all those days in my previous life when I pretended to be generous, crying in silence, feeling wronged every single day, it was exhausting. But now, I no longer needed to endure anything, because I truly no longer cared. I looked straight into Ethan's eyes, my expression emotionless. She was your promise to a fallen comrade. Treating her and her daughter well is the right thing to do. But Ethan Carter, I can't accept a husband who repeatedly abandons his own wife for another woman. That's why it ends here. From now on, we live our own lives. Don't interfere with mine anymore. Ethan raked a hand through his hair, his voice filled with desperation. Lisa, why won't you believe me? I let out a cold, humorless laugh, my gaze icy, my smile devoid of emotion. Why? Because I already lived through a failed marriage like that once. I will never go back to it. I suddenly remembered something from my past life. How Ethan once planned to adopt Lily as his own daughter, to put her under his household registration. His reason? I don't want Lily to grow up without a father like you did, living a lonely life. He clearly knew that was the deepest wound in my heart, yet he brought it up again and again without hesitation. For Sophie and her daughter, he had no problem stabbing me right where it hurt most, just like now. He claimed he had no feelings for Sophie, but after spending years side by side, how could emotions not develop? The thought alone made me feel nauseated, and I no longer wanted to waste even a single word on him. I spoke coldly. Ethan Carter, enough. I already decided to break off the engagement. After leaving you, I realized the world is actually bright and beautiful. The girl who used to cling to you is gone. Leave. Don't ever appear in front of me again. Without hesitation, I turned to walk away. The moment I did, Ethan rushed forward to grab me again, but a strong hand clamped down on his arm. A deep, steady male voice cut through, cold and clear. Are you all right? I've been watching him harassing you non-stop. The man who had appeared was none other than my senior from the same department, Adrian Liang. On my first day arriving at Southport Station, he was the one who came to pick me up. On the way, I learned he was originally from Beijing, later went abroad with his uncle, and eventually got accepted into this university. He didn't waste unnecessary words. He stepped forward, positioning himself protectively in front of me, his eyes cold as he looked at Ethan. Comrade, you're not a student here. You shouldn't be on this campus, and I witnessed you repeatedly harassing my classmate. Just then, the class bell rang. Students poured into the hallway from every direction, all stopping to look at the commotion. Ethan's face went pale, then flushed, utterly flustered. And no, it's not like that. Lisa is my fiancée. I came here to take her home. Adrian turned to me, his tone serious. Is what he said true? I shook my head firmly, like shaking a drum. No. Before I left, I wrote a clear annulment letter. Right now, there is absolutely nothing between us. Hearing that, Ethan panicked. His face flushed red as he tried to rush forward and grab my hand again. Lisa, you can't say that. I don't agree to annul the engagement. I looked sideways at Adrian, calm and composed. Adrian, he's truly troublesome. He comes looking for me every single day, non-stop. Could you ask the student office or campus security to escort him out? Adrian nodded, then turned to a nearby classmate and whispered, "Go get campus security." Very soon after that, Ethan Carter was forced to leave the campus on the grounds of harassing a student, but he still refused to give up. Day after day, he kept sending me registered letters, which meant I had no choice but to go to the post office to sign for them. In the letters, Ethan wrote, "Lisa, whether you believe me or not, there is truly nothing between me and Sophie Winters. Focus on your studies in the South. When you come back, we'll register our marriage. I'll treat you well for the rest of our lives. Let's pretend the annulment never happened." But Ethan's vows had never been trustworthy. In my previous life, he had said countless words just like these, yet the moment he turned around, he was already holding hands and exchanging loving glances with Sophie. I coldly tore all the letters into pieces, then went to the post office and changed my telegraph code so that any future mail from him would be redirected somewhere else. As long as he never bothered me again, that was enough. For the rest of this life, Ethan Carter and I would never have anything to do with each other again. Once Ethan was no longer harassing me, I could finally devote myself completely to studying and researching textile technology. Watching plain, meaningless pieces of fabric gradually transform into beautiful garments under my own hands filled me with a sense of satisfaction nothing else could compare to. And besides that, another person began appearing more and more often by my side. My senior, Adrian Liang. At first, he said he was worried Ethan might come looking for me again, so every day he personally escorted me to and from class. The campus was huge, and whenever we had to switch buildings, he would pedal his large 28-inch bicycle and take me across the grounds. Later on, he started bringing me small gifts, but I always turned them down. I knew he liked me. His gentle, sincere gaze was incredibly hard to ignore, even if I tried. Once, he told me, "You have a kind of feminine strength. I can't take my eyes off you." I only smiled without responding. Having lived one life already, all I wanted now was to focus on my studies. Matters of the heart could wait. At that moment, I didn't yet have the courage to start a new relationship. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to love again only when I could do so from a place of independence and strength. Time passed quickly. My 5 years at the public university finally came to a perfect end. I became an outstanding graduate and was invited on stage to give a speech at the welcome ceremony for the incoming freshmen. When my fashion design sketches were displayed on the large screen, the entire auditorium erupted into applause and cheers. In that moment, I knew I had touched my dream with my own hands. After graduation, I was honored to receive several fashion design awards, both domestic and international. Right after the ceremony, I declined offers from several overseas companies and chose instead to return to Beijing to build my career. After all, the factory had sponsored my 5 years of education. It was time for me to return and shine in the place where everything began. But as soon as I stepped out of the auditorium, I saw Adrian Liang standing at the school gate, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers. He walked toward me and suddenly dropped to one knee. His deep, steady voice rang out amid the breeze and the golden sunset. "Lisa, I know you've been hurt in love before, but today I still want to tell you, I like you. Would you be willing to be my girlfriend? I'll spend my whole life loving you." I stood there looking at the man who had quietly been by my side for 5 entire years, never pressuring me, never intruding, always silently protecting me. During all those years, he never once forced me to answer anything. He was simply there whenever I needed him. Amid the cheers and applause from my friends, my heart finally found its answer. I smiled, my eyes slightly misty with emotion, and slowly said the 2 words, "I agree." The next day, Adrian and I boarded the train back to Beijing. On the way, we unexpectedly ran into Mrs. Warren, who used to work with me at the textile factory and had since left to run a trading business. The moment she recognized me, she hurried over to chat. Then casually, she said, "Lisa, did you know? Ethan Carter and Sophie Winters registered their marriage last year." I simply listened quietly, my heart completely calm. Mrs. Warren continued, "Back then, after he returned to Beijing from your school, I heard he rented a separate place for Sophie and Lily. Sophie even tried to refuse, saying she and her daughter could stay at his place to save money. But Ethan insisted. He said a single man and a widow living under the same roof would go against social norms and cause gossip. And then that whole mess about him going to your university to find you got reported to his superior. He was disciplined immediately. Wasn't allowed to leave Beijing for 5 years. Probably because of that, he panicked and kept writing you all those apology letters, begging you to come back." She sighed. And after that, Sophie kept making excuses. Lily being sick, being bullied, needing help, calling Ethan over again and again. One mid-autumn festival, she even got him drunk and purposely slept in the same bed. The neighbors saw everything the next morning. The whole county was talking about it. And because Lily kept calling him Daddy Carter, the rumors spread even worse. People were saying you left because he cheated on you. But you were already down south studying. No matter what explanation you gave, no one cared. Eventually, the organization stepped in and forced him to marry Sophie. Mrs. Warren glanced at me, then at Adrian walking beside me, gently holding my hand. She chuckled with admiration. "Lisa, you really know how to pick the right path. Staying away from that mother and daughter was the biggest blessing of your life. You even got into university, went south to study, and now you've got this tall, handsome young man by your side. He's way better than that Captain Carter." I only smiled in response, but inside, I knew I was truly fortunate. Fortunate to have been reborn before the college entrance exam. Fortunate to have escaped the muddy darkness of my previous life. Fortunate to have finally met a man who genuinely loved me. After getting off the train, Adrian and I went straight to the factory. Before graduation, an international company had reached out, wanting to collaborate on transferring advanced textile technology to the factory. This trip back was mainly to discuss the details of that cooperation. After a long afternoon of meetings and careful planning, we decided to hold a mobilization conference the next day. The plan was to gather all unemployed female workers in the area and select a group of quick, skillful ones to participate in the technological transition. When the administrative clerk handed me the list of unemployed workers, I only needed a glance to see Sophie Winters' name. Just like in my previous life, she was among the first to be laid off. I raised an eyebrow but didn't bother commenting. The next morning, as Adrian and I stepped into the factory, a familiar voice exploded behind me. "Lisa, you actually dare show your face here? Let me warn you, I'm married to Ethan Carter now. Whatever happens between us has nothing to do with you anymore." Sophie Winters stood there with her arms crossed, her face full of arrogance. Her eyes flickered with a hint of suspicion, as if she had just noticed something. "Isn't today the factory's mobilization meeting? Don't tell me you're here to compete for a spot too. Don't forget, 5 years ago you stopped being a worker here." Adrian instinctively stepped forward, but I gently held his arm and calmly spoke. "Forget? How could I ever forget?" I said. "Didn't I graciously give you my permanent factory position back then?" The moment those words left my mouth, Sophie Winters' expression changed instantly. She was so furious she jabbed a finger right at my face, ready to curse me out. But just then, the factory director stepped out of his car and walked over. After glancing around, he pointed at her and barked, "Enough! Who allowed you to shout at the factory's new designer?" Sophie froze in place as if struck by lightning, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. "What? You're saying the new designer is Lisa?" She immediately changed her expression. Just moments ago, she had been arrogant and hostile, but now she switched to a greasy, flattering smile. "Lisa, I was wrong. I must have mistaken you earlier and said nonsense. Don't take it to heart, okay? You've come back to help the factory. Please lend us a hand." As she spoke, she leaned close and whispered in my ear. "Later, when you pick workers, make sure to choose me. I've been unemployed for 3 years now. My whole family only survives on Ethan's allowance. We're having a really hard time." I snorted, pushed her aside without the slightest courtesy, and walked into the assembly hall with Adrian. During the meeting, I opened my suitcase and took out a dress sample I had brought from the South. As my design was projected onto the screen, I analyzed the stitching techniques in detail. After the presentation, I assigned a task. Within 30 minutes, every worker present had to sew an inner lining for the dress. While they worked, I deliberately walked around the factory. This place where I had shed blood, sweat, and tears in my previous life. Soon, workers began finishing their pieces. When the selection was completed, the final list of workers to be retained was prepared. I instructed little Lee from the office to bring the list down to the workshop and announce it. Not long after, loud, angry shouting erupted downstairs. "Lisa, you're such a petty witch. How dare you use your position for personal revenge? You're jealous that I married Ethan, right? Jealous that he kicked his orphaned, raised since childhood future wife out of the house for me? I thought you had a kind heart. Turns out you're nothing but a disgusting woman." Sophie Winters was so furious she lost all control, hurling insults and profanity in front of everyone. The factory director immediately ordered security to escort her out and announced that she would be permanently banned from being rehired. Before she was taken away, I gestured for little Lee to bring me her sewing assignment. I picked up the poorly sewn, puckered, wrinkled dress lining and threw it directly at her. "Sophie Winters, this is your skill level? Even new graduates are better than this. Tell me, why should I hire you? This is a textile factory, not a charity." The moment I finished, Sophie suddenly jerked free from the security guards. She pulled a small, sharp object from her pocket and lunged at me. In that split second of danger, strong hands blocked the blow, blood streaming down. Ethan Carter stood in front of me. His eyes were ice cold as he shouted, "Are you crazy, Sophie? Haven't you caused enough damage? And now you're trying to hurt Lisa too?" Sophie froze as if struck by a fatal blow. His look of disgust stabbed straight into her heart. She collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. "It's not my fault. You pushed me to this. Don't think I don't know. You call her name every night in your sleep. Now she's back. What about me? What about Lily?" Ethan tossed the makeshift weapon aside and opened his mouth to speak, but the security team rushed in. They immediately handcuffed Sophie on the spot. She knew this time she would not escape. In this era, attacking someone with a weapon was a serious crime. What awaited her was prison, a heavy sentence, and the complete destruction of her life. Ethan Carter. At that moment, Ethan no longer showed even a trace of pity. He simply said coldly, "I promised I would take good care of Lily." Adrian hurried over and wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close, gently stroking my shoulder as he whispered reassurance, afraid that even the slightest thing might hurt me. Over his shoulder, I saw Ethan's eyes fixed on me, filled with pain and loss. In a low, almost pleading voice, he said, "Lisa, can we talk for a moment?" When our eyes met, I almost didn't recognize the man standing in front of me. In my previous life, Ethan Carter had always been poised and confident, a commanding officer who walked with his head held high and eyes bright with determination. But now in front of me stood an unshaven, weary man, hair graying and messy, looking lost and hollow, like someone who no longer knew where he belonged. He finally spoke, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry for everything back then. I've wanted to apologize for so long. Afterward, I realized the problem and punished Lily severely for what she did. I was foolish. I was wrong. Lisa, can we start over?" I let out a bitter laugh and looked straight at him, my gaze ice cold. "Ethan Carter, did you forget? You're a married man. You really love betraying people that much?" His face stiffened. His fingers trembled as they rubbed the side of his pants leg. I can get a divorce. Just give me a little time. I can do it." I cut him off immediately, my voice firm. "Never, Ethan Carter. Stop lying to yourself. You dare say you never had feelings for Sophie Winters? You claimed it was just taking care of her, but what you were doing was hiding your feelings behind duty and righteousness." I continued, my voice steady, resolute. "I already lived far too long in that twisted relationship. My life only truly began after I left you. And you no longer deserve to stand beside me." With that, I took Adrian's hand and walked away without looking back. Behind me came the sound of a choked sob, then louder, breaking into wails. Ethan stood in the middle of the factory courtyard, crying from quiet tremors to full, despairing screams. That cry carried regret, pain, and torment. 2 years later, I had become the owner of the first private fashion studio in Beijing. Our dress designs became a nationwide sensation, even featured on the Spring Festival Gala, the most prestigious stage in the country. And in that same year, Adrian Leong proposed to me. In his eyes, I saw a love that was complete, genuine, and without hesitation. Not long after, I became pregnant. Today, Adrian drove me to the largest hospital in Beijing for my prenatal checkup. The moment we reached the hospital gate, I unexpectedly encountered someone from my past. Since our last conversation, I hadn't seen Ethan again. I heard he had retired early and taken his family back to his hometown. Now he was hunched over, pushing a wheelchair. Sitting in it was an elderly woman, his mother, who had been my mother-in-law in my previous life. Judging by the timing, she must have recently fallen down the stairs, leaving half her body paralyzed. Walking beside them was a young woman, clearly Lily Winters, now already an adult. I was about to turn away when I heard Ethan say, "Lily, help me carry these bags. Your grandmother can't move on her own, and I can't manage everything." Lily frowned impatiently. "Why should I? You're not even my real dad. And that old woman stinks. I don't want to go near her." Then she spun around and stormed off without a backward glance. Ethan struggled to gather the bags, gritting his teeth as he pushed the wheelchair forward. When he walked past me, he kept his head down at first. But then, as if sensing something, he suddenly looked up. But his gaze instinctively fell to my belly, now visibly rounded. Ethan froze, rooted to the spot. For some reason in that brief moment, a thought flashed through his mind. If the woman he had married back then had been Lisa, maybe now they would have had a warm, complete family, not the broken life he was living. Years passed. I gave birth to a son and a daughter, both obedient and kind. Adrian Leong truly kept the promise he once made. He spent his entire life loving me wholeheartedly. On my 60th birthday, our family of 9, 3 generations, gathered around the table. We shared cake and took pictures, laughter filling the courtyard. My little granddaughter tugged at my sleeve, insisting she wanted to see the bouquet of roses her grandfather had bought for me. But the moment we stepped into the living room, she blinked in confusion and said, "Grandma, there's an old man sleeping outside." Curious, I followed her to the yard, and to my shock, the man lying there was Ethan Carter. He was still without breath. But in his hand, he clutched a worn yellow document, the marriage registration form I once left behind. Across it was a shaky, trembling line of 2 words. "I'm sorry." I stood there in the soft breeze, my eyes calm, neither sad nor resentful. I no longer needed that apology, because in my arms was a radiant bouquet of roses in full bloom, and behind me was a family overflowing with love. My present, my future, everything I once never dared to dream of.